Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk some more about the Galactic Center. Specifically, we're going to talk about the Super Galactic Center. I did a video about this last week. I want to talk a little bit more about it from a trauma lens, because I mentioned wanting to do that. Before I get into that though, I want to do my disclaimer that I have a lot of astrological knowledge. But when it comes to the Galactic Center and the Super Galactic Center or the Great Attractor or anything in deep space, I am really just fucking around with astrology here. I am not claiming to be an expert at this. Just tossing out ideas, fucking with shit, and I reserve the right for any and or all of this to be wrong later on if I find that it is, or if I find that I don't like it, as I go through the process, because sometimes that happens. Kind of like how I had to correct myself with what to pull. And again, for the Super Galactic Center, make sure I'm still curious about the galactic pull thing, but I would pull Messier 87, M87 on astro.com. That's what I would pull. That's what I'm pulling now. I would do that. So last week I linked an article that Philip Sedgwick wrote about the Super Galactic Center, and I'll link it again in the description box here for this video, about how the Super GC might tie in with trauma. I could see that being the case. I could. Just the nature of what a black hole is. It's kind of like, it's kind of like a void and a vacuum where things get changed and twisted and time goes in all directions, and I could see there being some trauma involved. I could see there being trauma involved with the GC too. I could see that being the case, but since the Galactic Center is the center of our galaxy, the GC trauma, the trauma from the GC, if there's any trauma from the GC, it would, unless of course something's going on with the nodes, right, with the north-south nodes, Pluto, whatever, makes an aspect to it or whatever, the trauma might have to do with more with this lifetime versus the Super GC, since it's beyond our galaxy. It also seems like it would be beyond this lifetime. It does. That makes sense to me, that it probably would be. Meaning you're probably looking at trauma from some other time and place, if you want to look at it through a lens of trauma. And this is just one lens that you can look at the Super GC through. But I do think that it's a valid one to look at, a valid angle to look at this through. Let me read you. I'm going to read you what he has written about this. It's pretty short, it's pretty brief. He says, I'll start here. This consumption continues until finally the person figures out that no one or no thing can ever fill the emptiness inside. This consumption continues until finally the person figures out that no one or no thing can ever fill the emptiness felt inside. Typically, some childhood trauma that negated one's self-worth can be found in the psychology. And sometimes there is no definable family or origin scar. Should one scour the archives of past lives seeking the source? No. It does not matter what the origin is. The intellectual understanding offers nothing to the essence of the situation. It must be healed regardless. Okay, I do agree that there probably is trauma connected to the Super GC. There probably is. I could see that being the case. However, this is where I differ from him. I do not think that it doesn't matter what the origin is. Or let me rephrase. To some people, it may not matter. I think it really depends on what planet. And when I'm talking about this, I'm really thinking that probably the people that are going to feel this the most are going to be people that have conjunctions to the Super GC. I really do. Or oppositions. I'm just not sure. The opposition part I haven't quite figured out yet, because I don't know exactly what's opposite the Super GC. I know there's probably something there. I just don't know what it is. So I am thinking about conjunctions primarily, people that have something conjunct, a planet, Chiron, the north or south nodes, something, you know, along those lines. Or, I mean, I know that you could even, I mean, if you wanted to, I'm not looking at these in the research, but if you wanted to throw like the bigger asteroid series, Juno, whatever. But yeah, conjunctions is kind of where I'm going with this. But I don't think that it's always not important that you don't know where the origin comes from, where the wounding comes from. Now, if we're talking about a past life thing, will you ever really know? Really know for sure? Probably not. But I do think, I don't think that there's no merit in trying to figure that out. I probably shouldn't consume you. But I think depending on the chart, might give you an idea as to if that's important or not, and I'll tell you why. Like, for instance, in my chart, I have, just for instance, I have the Super GC conjunct my South Node. You know, oh, I don't know, make sure you saw it. Right up there. So, in my case, it feels like it probably is pretty important that I maybe figure out what that trauma actually is to be able to work through it. Now, if you have something else going on conjunct the Super GC, it may not be as important for you. It may not be. But I don't think that it's always right to say that it doesn't matter at all. I don't think that it should consume one, though. Probably. It shouldn't be a consuming thing. Because really what matters is how you heal whatever trauma is there, right? Now, if we're talking about, I mentioned the South Node, but I don't know. It would depend on what planet you have going on. So, like, let's say you've got, like, the Sun conjunct the Super GC. There might be some kind of ego trauma, identity trauma, something along those lines could be going on. This would also depend on, because you can have conjunctions, right? You could have a Virgo Sun conjunct the Super GC just because of where the Super GC is, or a Libra. It would depend on what sign, you know, we're talking about, but as to how that plays out. But yeah, the Sun conjunctions to the Super GC and the Sun, you'd be looking at something like ego or identity trauma. The Moon, you would be looking at like emotional trauma, perhaps. Nurturing trauma, mothering trauma, these kinds of things. And again, since you are looking at it, because the Super GC does feel like it extends beyond just this lifetime, it would probably be something from a previous lifetime or what have you. Something along those, you know, especially like, okay, like let's say somebody has some sort of like mothering trauma, right? But there's no real basis for it in this lifetime. Let's say they had like a happy upbringing. They had a mother that was wonderful and present and didn't fuck them up, right? Like there wasn't anything that they can think of that their mother did that would have fucked with them, but they feel fucked with regardless. This would be a good example of like trauma from the Super GC. Which again could also have to do with the Super GC being like a void, being like a vacuum, warping things, right? Could have to do with that. But it's also probably something that stems from a previous lifetime too. That's the way that I would roll with this anyway. That's the way that my mind is rolling with this as it is. Something having to do with Mercury. If you got Mercury conjunct the Super GC, you'd be looking at somebody that had like perhaps mental trauma or perception trauma or communication trauma or something along those lines from a previous lifetime lens. And there's no real discernible reason for it in this lifetime, but it exists. That seems pretty apt. Like it, you know, it could go that way. So I would definitely take a look at your chart, take a look at, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this too, people that have conjunctions to the super GC, because this is one that I'm just kind of dipping my feet into. I would be curious to know if you've got conjunctions. If you feel like there is any trauma surrounding that planet, what that planet wants to express, is there any trauma surrounding that? And you know, it could have an underlying cause in this lifetime. I mean, there could be, but where it feels like the roots of it are just, they extend beyond this lifetime. I would love to hear your experience with that. If you have one, if you understand what I mean. I hope I'm being clear about exactly how I mean this. I hope I am. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear your experiences with that and with any trauma that might exist there. And the thing about the trauma here is because it is like, because black holes, like, they warp things, they change things, they, you know, time gets pulled in all kinds of directions. There is an ability to transmute. So these people actually, when they heal that, or when they try to heal that, they can be very healing for other people. There is a very Chiron flavor to this, though just extending. There's a Chiron retrograde flavor to this, because I think that Chiron retrograde in a natal chart tends to point to a previous lifetime wounding, generally, even if it has nothing to do with the nodal axis or Pluto or whatever. It has to me, I read it as if it's a wounding from a previous lifetime. My mind tends to go that way. This is kind of the same thing. This has a very Chiron retrograde flavor to me. Doesn't mean that there can't be wounding in this lifetime too. There can be, but I do think that it's like the original trauma didn't stem from this lifetime. It stemmed from another time and place. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, on all of that, if you have any. Especially since, like I said, I am just dipping my feet into this for the first time, really dipping my feet in. So I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts or whatever that you might have on it. But yeah, I think that's probably pretty good for right now. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck With Astrology. I'm at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Paternal Astrology on Instagram. If you want to like or subscribe or whatever the fuck people do with videos on YouTube, you can find us by searching for Let's Fuck With Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the red thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck With Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.